Good evening and welcome to your Four Lads Sunday show. Now, before I introduce my guests, I need to give a quick mention to all of the wonderful sponsors here at Four Lads. Firstly, some breaking news. I need to say a massive welcome to the Four Lads family, to our exclusive Sunday show sponsor, Mortgage First. They're a family-run mortgage and protection advice business, and they're going to be supporting the Sunday show for this season. So we are absolutely thrilled to have them on board with us. We're also delighted to have the support of CBD Oil Scotland, LBJ Consultants, Elite Scooters Scotland, Metaclad, the Aesthetics Lounge by Sharon, Denhay Bacon, as well as our very own Candid, as well as the season-long partners that we've got over at Rangers Youth Development Company, Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Everyone here at Four Lads really appreciates all the support and continuing to allow us to deliver fantastic content like this for you all season long. Now on to my guests. As usual, I'm joined by two of the regular Sunday show crew. Mark, how are you this weekend?
I'm good, mate. It's been a busy day. I was up early, drove to Scotland, played golf, then watched Rangers, then came home and I'm on the pod now. So busy day, but it's been good. And I've got a bit of sun, so I'm happy. Happy
days. A man of action. That's what we like to hear. All worth it, hopefully. And then the next guest really does need no introduction. She is the Queen of Four Lads and Rangers podcasting. Cheryl, how are you? Fresh from the gantry?
I'm fresh from the gantry, yes. It was good. It was all right. Everybody going a wee bit mental. Everybody being in a wee bit of a panic. Twitter going a wee bit nuts as well. So we've got a lot to talk about. There was some good things today. There was certainly the first half. There was some all right things, but like I say, we've got plenty to talk about. But I'm great, thank you.
Good. And before we get into the football, the friendlies and all that sort of stuff, I wanted to mention the live show that the guys held at Scott Arfield's Bar 442 on Friday. Stevie, Kenny, Amrit and Scotty were joined on stage there by Kevin Thompson. And the guys just wanted me to say a massive thank you for everybody that turned up to support the show, but also for the feedback on the pod in general. We never ever take that type of support for granted. So they just wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody that turned up, all the staff and team at 442 for their hospitality, as well as Kevin Thompson for turning up on that night and putting on such a good show. There hopefully will be more live shows in the offing. So if you do have a venue or anyone that's interested in getting us along, feel free to drop us a little message and we can get that arranged. So first up, I wanted to cover, I guess, the friendlies, because ultimately the role of the friendlies is to get the players up to speed for the big kick-off on Friday against Dundee United. Now, I personally don't really pay much attention to the results that we get in these games. I think it was interesting that the manager today also mentioned that the real focus is actually the work that we need to do ahead of Dundee United in the European games coming up. Now, we'll probably dive into each of the games in a wee bit more detail, but generally, how do you think we've handled pre-season? Cheryl, have we done enough during it to get the preparation right for that game against Dundee United at Tannadice on Friday night?
I think it was always going to be very, very difficult given the circumstances of last season, given the change of manager, also the fact that we know there's a real lack of quality in the squad, as it was at the end of last season. We know that there needs to be a lot of change. We also know that there needs to be a lot of players going out as well. So pulling that all together is extremely difficult. I know that people always say, you refer to their Rob, it's just about fitness, but I think people do get dead twitchy and look at these friendlies as a real sign of how things are going to be. Of course, it's about fitness. Of course, it's about the preparation. It's about trying things out. It's about him having a look at players actually on the pitch and playing. But I do understand why there's wee bits of concerns about it. But given everything that we've got to do and everything that's got to be put in place, I think they've gone all right. I think today was certainly a marked improvement. I know we'll probably go into the game separately, but I think we at least saw a few things that were lacking on Wednesday against St Etienne, definitely.
Yeah, and it's a nice segue, Mark, into that first game at St Etienne, because I think, as you can expect with friendlies. It wasn't really a vintage performance, but we did manage to beat them 2-1 thanks to a couple of things that we love to hear. You know, penalty to Rangers at Ibrox, Shankland and Asgard both scoring from the spot. You know, it looked like Shankland was playing just behind Chamiti. How do you think? How do you felt we played in that game? I'm not sure if you've been able to see the whole game or whether it's just been highlights. But what was your thoughts on that one, mate?
Are you on about Wednesday or today?
Wednesday.
So I done the post match with Andrew, to be fair, and I think we went in great detail about it. I think there was a couple of concerns for me defensively. I thought we were a bit all over the place. I thought our distribution wasn't that great, and probably a similar team today. Even though I thought we were better today, and to Cheryl's point, it was a marked improvement. It was just that lack of creativity was probably my concern. We scored 2 penalties, won the game, which is great, and I think that importance of having that. You know, we also talk about friendlies, the importance of getting fitness, but I think winning and having that habit is vitally important going into the start of the season. You know, breeding that confidence and then taking it from there. But Wednesday I had a few concerns. I think it's clear that we need some players to come in. I think there's some players that need to go. But you know what, we've got to win. And you know what, I know they're a League 2 side now, but they were in League 1 last season. There's some decent players. I thought they were quite young, athletic. It was a good test for us. And they were actually quite tight on the ball as well. So that was a different challenge. I just thought we could have been better on the ball. And just the worrying thing for me was just sort of how open we were, along with, we just didn't create enough. But look, we got the win.
Yeah, we did. I think the interesting thing as well, over the course of both friendlies, and we'll maybe touch on it a wee bit, Cheryl, is the fact that Finlay Curtis has been hooked at half-time in both of them, which is a bit of a shame. Obviously, at St Etienne, I think the manager alluded to the fact that he needed an extra body in midfield to bring Devlin on, just to change shape, because we were so open in that game. Does that bode a bit of concern on his performances so far, and the manager taking him off at half-time? It is only friendlies, absolutely, but we really need him as one of our attacking players to be making an impact in some of these games, and he did it so well at Killie the second half of last year.
I think he was very, very clear, wasn't he, that St Etienne game, that it wasn't down to him. He didn't get a lot of the ball, but that wasn't his fault. And I think certainly the first half, a lot of what was coming well and was working well for Rangers was happening down the left. So he didn't get as much of the ball, but that's because I think the left in the first half, the left-hand side actually worked very well together. And that was where we didn't have a lot of shots on goal, but that's where a lot of the creativity was. I think I wasn't surprised to see McInnes change things up at half-time. I think there was 4 that went off and he was one of them. I'm not overly worried by that just now. I think what I am a wee bit worried about is just that lack of creativity. Yes, we need him, but we can't rely on, and we never were going to rely on Finlay Curtis alone in it. And if we are, we really are up Greek. But we desperately need something, because we were really poor in the final third. We were, and we do have options there, but there was just that bit of quality that was missing. And where, for me, I saw a huge sort of difference in the second half was without Devlin. When you took Devlin off that, and I know he changed formation, he changed to the 3-5-2 as well, but there was just an absolute lack of fight. There was nobody breaking up the play. There was nobody winning the ball back. It was just dead sloppy, and West Ham just played right through us. That wasn't a system that worked. But I think taking Devlin off was the big thing. You noticed the drop in quality and the drop application and fight as well. So I'm not as worried about Curtis coming off. We know he's a young player. We know we need more quality around him as well. But the drop off between the first half and the second half for me was quite concerning.
Yeah, and I think interesting, Mark, that Cheryl's highlighted Devlin there, because it's one of the things that I noted in both games, that when he come on against St Etienne, I felt we played much better, and you saw him again that first half against West Ham today, being the little pain in the backside that we all knew that he would be. And I think it's a sign that many people were probably a bit disappointed that we'd actually signed him to come in. But when you see some of the work that he does, it's imperative that we've got players like that, because if we are going to have difference makers in that final third, they're typically players that don't like to do the dirty work, a la fellow Asgard. So you're going to need somebody to come in and do that mopping up and do the running about, the tackling, the getting in people's faces, because that frees up your more creative players. And I think that lack of creativity is highlighted even further by the fact that over the 2 games, Devlin's probably been one of the standout performers in both of them. And you don't want your defensive midfielders being the people that are catching your eye. You want the forward players to be the ones that are getting you off your seat, or at least getting you excited about the season ahead.
I think it's pretty telling of where we are. We've obviously went on, and I think probably that word creativity will probably be used quite a lot tonight. But in reference to Devlin, I think he's been excellent. Been really impressed with him so far. I said two obviously performances we've seen a bit of him in terms of last season when he obviously played us in a couple of games here and there. I think he's probably one of these boys who won't catch your eye in the sense of technically outstanding, but I think the dirty work that he does is absolutely, the impact on the team is huge. I think he's quite streetwise as well. There's a foul he done in the first half at West Ham. I was quite impressed with that, whereas probably last season we were quite impacted by that in a number of games where we just didn't have that side of our game. And then he's prepared to put the boot in as well. I think for too long we've been too nice, and I think players like that we have been missing. I think, you know, people may say, I've seen comments before in terms of he's actually a good footballer. From what I've seen, I actually think he's got a bit of trickery so far. I said I know it's early days, but based on the 2 performances, I've been impressed not only by that side in terms of the dirty side, but his actual technical ability has been actually pretty good. So I think it's a great signing. I'm quite impressed with his attitude, and I think one thing is definitely committed to the club. And you know, you can see when he's playing, he's all in.
I don't know if you guys noticed it, but there was a point today where Gassama, not for the first time, made a slack pass, and he was right over at him. Devlin was over at him, and he wasn't shouting at him, but he was kind of jockeying him on and was speaking to him. And we've missed that. How much last season did we bemoan the fact that there was nobody on the pitch doing that? And he's come in straight away in his second game and is in everybody's faces. As you said, he's a wee pest, but he's also sort of taking on that leadership role with the other players as well, which I thought was dead refreshing after what we had to put up with last year.
Yeah, it's a great point, Cheryl, because it was something that McInnes, I think, highlighted as well, that he loved managing them at Hearts for, was because he's the kind of player that does hold other people to account around the training pitch and on the playing field. And we needed more players like that last year. You know, we've spoken about leadership across God knows how many pods last season on the Sunday show, and not just, but generally across the Four Lads network. So it's a massive area of the gap that has been really, really lacking. And it's an interesting point, because we'll probably just jump to it now, which is looking ahead at the captaincy role. You know, ultimately we've probably got 4 or 5 candidates now for that ahead of the Dundee United game, and I think the manager's spoken about in the post-match that he kind of knows who he's going to give the armband to. But you've had Neil, Shankman, Godfrey, Sterling, who have all had the armband in the friendlies. You add Dragojevic into the mix now in the leadership role that he had at Partizan Belgrade, Mark, and you know, suddenly we are spoilt for choice for leaders within that team, and it's going to be really interesting to see who McInnes picks to give the armband to. Probably something that we fans maybe put a little bit more focus on than maybe managers do these days, as it came through in the comments and his presser. But who do you think would be the main one for it at the moment, based on what you've seen?
First of all, I think in terms of the fans getting about it up in arms, I understand, because it's a privileged position to be in. And, you know, I mean, from our perspective, whoever's leading that team, you know, all eyes are on them. And I think it's important that we have some form of a leader leading the team. We've went on Tav for years and years now. It's the good points, the bad points, etc. I'm not going to go too much into Tav, but I think one that, you know, from my perspective, I always think it should be a defender. It's just, as me probably being biased, because that's what I used to play back in my playing days. If Sterling was fit and available all games, I'd be giving it to Dujon. Worry I have is he doesn't play all the time and he picks up niggles here and there. So I think, even though he's a new boy, I think it should be Godfrey. And I think based on a couple of things I've seen so far, I think today is probably a prime example of how aggressive he was. You know, I seen him pointing, you know, making instructions, etc. while the game was on, and that was on the cameras. for me, I think it would be him. I think the others you've mentioned there, I think are all good candidates, all got experience of leading teams out. But for me, I'd be going for Godfrey, just given where he plays, and I think just what I've seen so far, I've been impressed. But Dujon would be on number one if he was to play every week. But sadly, he's obviously had his injury problems in the past.
I'm gonna feel the fire a little bit here, Sheryl, and come at you for your thoughts. But is the captain even at the club yet? Is he still to be signed potentially? Given some of the players that we have been interested in.
No, I agree 100% with Mark. And I've seen in the comments something about fed up at the Sterling fit thing, but it's true, we can't rely on him, unfortunately. See, if we could, I don't think he'd be with us. If he was a player that was fit 90% of the time, I don't think he'd be playing for us because he's excellent. But unfortunately, he does have these spells where he's out for quite a long time, and for me that would maybe take him out of that captaincy role. But I think Godfrey really impressed me. I think he did a lot of covering for Fernandez on Wednesday, but today they were much better. You could actually see them speaking to each other. Manny was a wee bit more switched on. He wasn't pushing out as much as he was on Wednesday, therefore he wasn't getting caught. But for me, my first choice would be Godfrey. My second choice would be Lawrence Shankland. Because again, he's just, he knows what he gets it. It's a bit of naff. We all say it, don't we, and you all cringe. But he does get it. He's wanted to be here for a long time. He knows what it means. He's one of us. So if it wasn't Godfrey, I'd be very happy with it being Shankland.
And personally, that's the one out of the group that I would. I mean, I see a few folk in the comments saying we can't really give it to a lone player, and I kind of get that. But I think for me, given he was manager under McInnes at Hearts, he's likely going to be one of the starting strikers. He's a boyhood fan. There's a lot going for Shankland being captain, and I think it means just that little bit more if you've been a supporter of a boyhood club and you get to represent them like that, and you'd be the one that'd be doing your nut if somebody's not going full throttle into attack or making a loose pass. And I think the great thing is we've got options. Whereas last season we'd be sitting here trying to figure out if we had a captain in the team. No slight to anybody that used to be playing for Rangers. So at least it's changed days where we've actually got multiple leaders that we could potentially look at. Before we touch on the West Ham game, Sheryl, we've obviously had our first glimpses now of Pandor, and I think while we didn't really get much action in either game, to be honest, within the St Etienne game, there was a spell where he'd actually made a couple of really, really good stops during that game. I think the thing that's really impressed me in the last two games is actually just how quick off his line he seems to be. Now, it's really hard to judge a player like this only on two friendlies, but you give the rave reviews that he's had kind of at Hull last season and the part that he played in their promotion. It certainly looks like a promising start for him. Now, it's all about keeping the ball at the back of the net, but so far, so good.
Yeah, and do you know what? He had a great save today. I think it was kind of halfway through the second half where West Ham had a shot. It was either a shot or a free kick, and it kind of bounced in front of him, but he was down and he got it. I think that's been an excellent bit of business. It really has. We were all quite fond. I know he could be a bomb scare at times, but we were all quite fond of Jack Butland, especially how he was as a man around the club as well. So to have him go down to Hull and get a wee crack at the EPL, but to have Pandor up with us, I think we've certainly got the better end of the deal, and it looks really, really promising as well. I think for the defenders to have a goalie behind you that you can have a wee bit of confidence in as well is going to be a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, Mark, did anybody else stand out in the St Etienne side of things before we jump on to the West Ham that you'd want to give a quick mention to?
No, I think mainly the goalie was one for me. I thought, I'd say Devlin centre half, like we obviously went on about. I thought he'd done well. I think St Etienne, it was the first game back at Ibrox, midweek, and they'd been through some of the sessions back to Spain. I'm going to give them a little bit of grace, given how they were today. It was definitely night and day from Wednesday to what it was today, but others, not really. I thought some were okay, but You know, went through in great detail on Wednesday night, but it just definitely a difference from Wednesday to today. And you know, also the goalkeeper, I think, is one. It was a position that we had to strengthen. I think Cheryl's right. You know, Jack Butland, you know, throughout his time I thought he was excellent. He had his moments like, you know, goalkeepers doing. If they make a mistake, they get punished. It's as simple as that. But I think the business we've done on the back of, you know, swapping along with paying $3 million, I think it's good business. I think he'll be a success. He commands his area, comes out for crosses. You know, I said on the pod the other day as well, where there was questions about his kicking. I think he's been excellent. His distribution is actually very, very good, which is good to see. And the other thing as well with him is he's only been with us since Monday. Everyone forgets this. You know, he's only been here for a few days. He's played 2 games. He's probably staying in a hotel, and you know, he's delivered these performances. I think we're on a winner with him, and I'm quite excited to see how he'll do for this season. But I think it's a great bit of business for Rangers.
Before we move on, Rob, sorry, just before you were going to move on, and I know that Mark will have spoken about this on Wednesday, but I think it's probably, if we're thinking about the St Etienne game, to pick up on Asgard's cameo as well, because that came as quite a nice surprise towards the end of that game. I didn't realise that he had taken the option to actually come back and cut his holiday short and come back and start training and be the squad and be part of the friendlies as well. He looked very promising, just focusing on that game alone. He came on, he looked up for it, and he provided us with a wee bit of spark as well. So the St Etienne game alone, I thought it looked great.
Funnily enough, Cheryl, you can imagine with the comments in our group chat, he was going to be a potential topic for discussion tonight. Because it's interesting, you know, again, there's probably a number of players in that team at the moment that we could be looking at a bit of a redemption arc under the new manager. And Tello's right up there. You know, I don't think with him the technical ability has ever been in doubt. I think it's always been the question mark over his desire and his physicality within this league and whether he can actually step up to those demands. And I guess this is where having a manager versus a coach is the difference. You know, we've heard from a number of players in some of these interviews. We've heard the previous players that have played under McInnes about how he will get to know you and you'll want to run through a brick wall for him. And if he can have that type of influence, Mark, on somebody like an Asgard, all of a sudden we could be looking at a really good player that can be a difference in this team. And I know Dougie's going to be rubbing his hands with glee as we talk about the Alsatian in such glowing terms, but it's true. You know, I think everybody wants to see him do well, but it's one thing doing it in a friendly. It's about making sure that he rolls his sleeves up and does the dirty side of the game against a Dundee United when it really matters, and you need to win that opening game of the season. Because there's no doubt in the technical side with Asgard, it's always been that work rate and that physicality.
Yeah, I think, to be fair to Cheryl's point there, he cut his holiday short. He could easily have had another few days off, and he's came back and, you know, I mean, he's got his cell back in the pre-season. He's also shown that he's committed to the club. And he's obviously wanted to do better. Both performances, I forgot about saying it with Asgard, to be fair, so thanks for reminding me, Cheryl. It's probably one I want to just forget because it wasn't the best of games. However, he's came back and he's done relatively well. You know, I think he's had moments throughout the game today. I think the problem with Asgard is, to your point, Rob, he's got ability. He scores goals. You know, he's got trickery. He can go by players. He can influence games. I think the problem and where some of the frustration comes from last season in particular was it was too inconsistent, not enough. Whereas if this season, you know, he comes in under McInnes, arm round the shoulder, you know, embeds him in, you know, plays to his strengths, then absolutely there could be a player and he can definitely affect games. It's just one of the question is, he's a good footballer, but is he a good footballer for Rangers? And the only time will tell. We've obviously got to give him a chance. And hopefully he does do it. At the end of the day, he's in the building. We can see what he does. I think the problem you have is he can do it for one game and then he can go missing for 3 and 4. Hopefully he can turn that and there's that consistency week in and week out, and it benefits Rangers in the long run. I hope he does, but I think there will always be a cloud over while we have moments of greatness where then we've got weeks off not turning up, and that will always be the challenge it deals with. If he overcomes it, then it's benefit to Rangers.
And it's pressure that's going to be on him in the short term, Cheryl, because ultimately, if you look at that team just now, Tello Asgard is our one true creative player in there. He has the ability to run past players little tips and tricks like we've seen today. I mean, a great turn and run for his free kick where he eventually had to come off injured. So he could be the difference maker in the short term. But like McKenna said, there's no doubt in the abilities there, but it's got to come for him. And hopefully McInnes is the manager that can potentially unlock that.
Yeah. Do you know what Stevie and I were talking about him today, and I wonder if you had a few grafters around him, right? So you've got Devlin near him who clearly will get stuck in, will do that dirty work, will do the fouls, will break up the play. If you have those players around him that can really graft, that allow him to be what I called him last season, which was a luxury player, then that could work. But unfortunately, we don't have all of those players around him that allows us to afford them at the moment, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. You've got to have somebody that picks up that work rate for him if he's not going to be doing it. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm quite. It's weird to say that I'm excited by seeing Cammy Devlin in a Rangers top, but I think he's going to be one of these players that will surprise a few folk in the support this year with just how hard he will work in that midfield and allow players like maybe Asgard and whoever would come in at right or left wing potentially to be the difference makers to just go and take it on. I mean, if you think back of some of the teams, you had Ian Ferguson, Stuart McCall, players that grafted in the middle of the pitch, so they like say Laudrup and Gaza can go and turn on a bit of magic because they maybe didn't want to track back. That's what we need. You've got to have that balance in the team, and it is a great shout. And just like a broken clock, Dougie might be right twice a day. So we'll see whether Asgard is going to turn into the player that we all want him to be. But hopefully he can. And I think the shape thing's an interesting one as well, Cheryl, because I guess we've seen a few different shapes over the pre-season. I think against St Etienne it was more a 4-4-1-1. Today we started out more a 4-2-3-1. I think it certainly looked like that on paper. Switched it to a kind of a 3-5-2 with a couple of wing backs. For me, the 4-2-3-1 actually looked as if that suited us much, much better. Devlin obviously being part of that middle two was really, really useful. What do you think has suited us so far from what we've seen in the pre-season?
I can tell you what didn't suit us was when we went to having who was it? It was Ant-Man as one of the wing backs. That was it. Just didn't work. The 3-5-2 did not work at all. I just found that West Ham were playing right through it, and then what that meant was there was a lot of players who were completely out of position. I also didn't think today that having Nadiri up front on his own worked particularly well. I don't think he's somebody that can go up there and play as that lone striker, whereas I actually quite liked Shankland and Chermiti together. So I don't know. I think if I'm right, at Hearts, he tended to go 4-4-2. Is that right?
I think there was a bit of a mix because I think in some of the bigger games he either went for a kind of 4-4-1-1 or a 4-2-3-1 depending on who he was coming up against. I think the thing that I like about it is there's options depending on who you're playing against, because there's no chance that we'd open up in especially maybe European games where we're going to be playing against higher quality opposition. But for some of the games at Ibrox where you're expected to go and dominate a team, he will go and play two up front. So I think it's going to be interesting. But I agree on the Nadiri point today. I didn't think he was particularly great, but he always looked better when he was playing with Chermiti in the team last year before he got injured.
Just to pick up on something that's been running through the comments as well, and I'd like to get you guys' thoughts on it, because I don't want to panic and we can't be too reactionary, but I'm getting Joe Rothwell vibes, heavy Joe Rothwell vibes from Dan Neil.
I'll let Mark go first.
Nah, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. Joe, it's one though, because Joe Rothwell came in and was it Panathinaikos came in and we thought he was going to be an absolute player for us. And as time went on, it obviously wasn't the case. But I don't think they're the same type of player. Dan Neil's probably another one, technically very good, likes to take risks on the ball. But again, he's got not too similar to Devlin, but he has got the other side of his game as well, whereas Rothwell never had that.
You'll see it, Mark. And listen, I know it's dead early.
Yeah, I'm going for experience with Sunderland, like what I've seen at Sunderland. Games that I've seen when he's played, and I don't think compare him to Joe Rothwell. I don't think they're similar players. I think Daniel's tighter on the ball, and I think Daniel's got another side to his game which Joe Rothwell never had. Whereas that dirty side, that leadership, driving teams, Daniel's done that at Sunderland. Joe Rothwell's never done that. So I don't. But
did you not do that at Leeds a wee bit? Because I thought, like I remember we were joking today about his Daniel's corners, and it was like when we got Joe Rothwell and he was coming in as this dead ball specialist, who I don't know, maybe I'd missed any of his dead ball work at Ibrox, but I didn't see it at all. I haven't, and I know it's dead early, and I completely understand it, but I was really expecting big things from Daniel, and there's no really been that yet. Whereas see if you compare his impact to Cammy Devlin's impact, I was far more excited about Daniel than I was about Cammy Devlin coming in, but actually he's been the one that for me has shown a wee bit more, and I know it's dead early doors.
Yeah, I think in the first couple of pre-season games, from what I could tell with folk that had been over there watching it, Daniel was a standout in some of those games. He was the one that looked a little bit better, and I think it comes back to probably what kind of shape we're going to be playing and what personnel we've got next to him. For me, there have been some. Daniel's use of the ball has been much better than I expected. There's been a couple of really good passes through the lines, moving the ball really quickly. But again, it's dead early to judge these sorts of things. I mean, we probably have a bit of an issue when it comes to Championship midfielders because of what happened with Joe Rothwell. And it won't be too long before Dougie's exclaiming that he's part of the best midfield in the country again. But time will be the critical thing on him. I definitely think he looks a bit more mobile. He looks a bit better with the ball than Rothwell did. His delivery wasn't great today.
It wasn't always either. I think all his delivery has been poor. I think it's absolutely fair to call out. And that's one thing we got success from last season, whereas this season we've never really creating anything from corners, and part of that is delivery, and Daniel hasn't delivered so far. I think it's absolutely fair to call it out. I just think though there's other parts of his game which he's definitely more efficient and better than Joe Rothwell.
Yeah. So there we go. We think it's an unfair comparison for
I don't
Daniel.
mean as players, I mean just as the expectation. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't mean their actual style of play. I just mean we were dead excited about Joe Rothwell when he came in. He was going to control the midfield. He was going to be a dead ball specialist. And that just didn't materialise at all. And I haven't seen, again, only 2 games. I know that, but that's what we're doing today. We're discussing those 2 games. And I haven't seen as much from him as I hoped in terms of what I was expecting. I thought he was going to come in straight away, and I'm sure he will. And listen, there'll be nobody more delighted than me if he does or when he does.
I think it's fair. If you're going to start with 2 in midfield, Neil probably wouldn't be one of the 2 starters at the moment, based on what I've seen. Devlin would definitely be there, and it'd be really interesting to see who the potential other one is, but. Hopefully he will come good. Otherwise, we're paying a big wage again for a player that isn't going to make any impact. But as somebody said in the comments, you're going to have Dragojevic coming in, and you're not going to spend the best part of 5-6 million euros on a player and not start him. So you've got to think that it's going to be Dragojevic and somebody else within that midfield setup. But again, it comes back to at least we've got a few options in there. I think one of the things that is pretty clear is that if you want to talk about kind of game changers and bringing other players in, we're actually going to need to shift a few before that actually happens, and it probably brings us Mark to who do we look to move on at this moment in time. You've got rumours about Raskin, Barron having people interested in them. even Asgard was linked with Atlanta earlier on in the window. But who do we think is closest to moving? Because ultimately it's going to be key to freeing up the funds, I guess, and space in the squad to be able to kind of make some of these difference maker signings that we're going to have to.
Yeah, I think Raskin's probably top in terms of where he's at in his contract. One, I don't want to go. I'd love to keep him, but he's 2 years on his contract. I think the reality is he's had a decent World Cup. He's at his ceiling price. We have to cash in on him. I think it's absolute madness if we don't. I think that's where we are. We want him to go, but I just think the reality is if you're getting excess of £20 million for him, and we can reinvest in that squad, I think it's one that you can obviously you can absolutely utilise that money elsewhere. Barnes an interesting one as well, because I think based on before he got injured, he's probably one given how well he's performing under Denhay when he first came in. But I think the changes now we've got in the squad, Chukwueze just obviously came up there. You were talking about Devlin, etc. Boy for Serbia, there's some decent players in there, and then even the likes of Dan Neil. I don't think he needs to be a necessarily a starter, but I think he's a very good squad player if one of these boys were to drop out. So there's definitely options there. Barron would probably be one if there's interest in Italy like there was before, and we're talking around £8 to £10 million. I think we've got to consider it. Asgard's an interesting one because he's playing well now, but I think if you're getting offered up to 15 million or so, that's what we've obviously seen quoted. I think you have to consider it. Again, that amount of money. I know he's doing relatively well in the short space of time he's came back, and he obviously had some moments in the World Cup. But I think if you to look back the last 12 months and come the end of May saying you're going to get offered £15 million or so in July, most fans would have said, yes, we'll take it. So I think that's probably another one. The likes of Bayrami, I think, needs to go. I think there's a number of boys here that are, if you look at that bench today, how many of them were, going to be stars come the start of the season? I don't think there's many. There's too many players I don't think will impact the team. And Bayrami's another one. I think striker-wise, we're all right. And then Gassama and Ant-Man's probably too. Cheryl's saying it there about Ant-Man playing the wing back. And I know that's not his natural position, but you've still got that attacking impact, and I don't think he's done overly much. I think, again, if there's an offer coming in for Gassama, I think you've got to consider it, depending on the amount, obviously. I know he's a young man. He had his moments. He's a bit of an impact player coming off the bench, and he definitely has his moments. But again, I think I'll look at the first half today. Did he do enough? Does he look interested? I think that's in question. I think you've got to consider if there is money coming in. Again, it's a position that we absolutely need wingers. We're talking about Finlay Curtis. Gassama's there. We've got Ant-Man. But is it enough to give us a chance to properly go for this title? I think it puts us at risk. So that's where I am. I think there's quite a bit of business to do. But I think if you look at the numbers that are being quoted, quite a significant amount.
Yeah. I guess, Cheryl, the other thing that was interesting about the manager's comments today was that, he kind of alluded to the fact that there is already another incoming lined up, and that there should be a kind of announcement in the next 24, 48 hours. And that he's also then hopeful of potentially getting another one, maybe on loan or another permanent before the Dundee United game. I guess if you were head of recruitment or manager of the football club, which area of the pitch would you be focusing on to make sure that those signings were in those positions?
We need a right winger, don't we? Desperately. We really do. I don't know. I think he said today there would be one permanent and one loan. And I don't know. I've almost given up on Cherny, right? It would be brilliant to have him back. I don't think that that's going to happen. I would say a right winger and probably a centre back for me, a wee bit more cover at the back as well. I think we're in desperate need of. What do you guys think about a right back? Are you quite happy with having Sterling and McCrory there? That was the only other play. I don't think he'll bring another right back in, but I just wondered if there's enough cover there between McCrory and Sterling. I thought Sterling was great today. I thought he made a couple of tackles that were excellent, but is he that reliable?
My only worry with that was just some of the comments that he made. Obviously, Sterling didn't play against St Etienne, did he? Because he tweaked his ankle or something. And then McCrory didn't play the day because he tweaked his knee. So all of a sudden, if you're going to have question marks over your two first choice right backs or your two right backs, that isn't a really good position to be in, is it? You're going to need to have somebody there that we can rely on week in, week out. Now, it may well just be pre-season, they're getting trained quite a lot, they're working a lot harder than they normally would do week in, week out. But given our history with injuries and players being out for a length of time, sometimes it just makes you a little bit nervous. If the two of them can stay fit long enough that they can cover each other over the course of a whole season, I think looking at McCrory and looking at Sterling, they're good enough right backs to be able to cover that position. And then if there is the need, a youngster for the academy, if we've got one, I mean, Paul Inseoa has been filling in there. He's played a couple of the friendlies in that right back position, so you've got to maybe anticipate that the club are going to move him from central midfield into that right back area. He could be an option for coverage. Or you've got the wonderful Ant-Man who can potentially fill in there. But that would be desperate measures.
Aye, somebody on the right desperately, because we've just got nothing there. I don't know if you guys seen it as well, but there was a moment today over on the left where Gassama was breaking forward and he lost the ball, and I think it was maybe the second or third time, and right down in front of us, Derek McInnes went absolutely ballistic, and actually shouted for Ant-Man to go and warm up, but it was just unfortunate that when Ant-Man came on, he offered as much or even less than the person that he'd been replacing. Just as well, sorry to touch on something else that's been in the comments, and he was actually the player that was interviewed today in the presser. I'd be very interested to see both of your thoughts on Mohamed Diomande, because I have
I have forever longed for the player that played at North Stalin to come and turn up at Rangers. Dio is a player that frustrates the life out of me because, again, similar to probably Asgard, there is technical ability there. There's no doubt that there's technical ability there. But it comes back to what people were saying about last year. He's got the heart of a mouse. There's too many games where he will go into hiding, or he will do like a phenomenal turn and then pick the wrong pass or play it at the pitch. He's a midfielder that frustrates the life out of me, but I think that he's a player that if you can get some money back for him, you'd sell him. Sorry, Mark, I cut you off, mate. Hopefully you were going to say the same thing.
No, exactly. He was actually on my list earlier in terms of boys to get rid of, but I forgot about him. It goes to show how much an impact he had today. But I think he done all right for the first 20 minutes or so today, but it's like anything. He gets caught in the ball. Second half, there was too many times getting caught in the ball. We actually almost cost us a goal. West Ham broke and they almost scored. And he has these moments. Again, it's that piece. I think you're right when you probably do that comparison to Asgard, where he's definitely got ability about him. But again, it's just when he turns up when he wants. And at Rangers, we just can't afford it. It's as simple as that. I think if there's a reasonable offer in there, I think we've definitely got to consider and move him on, given I think the numbers we have in there now. I think for me he's surplus to requirements. But yeah, one we've not talked about is the left back. I think is probably another one I'm slightly nervous. We've got Romans, the best, like absolutely love him. The impact again, some of the deliveries he's got is incredible. But it's just if anything happens to him, we don't really have much cover there. I know we had the young boy Scally, if I remember rightly, but I don't know if he's going on loan or not. But I'd probably be another one I would be pretty keen to at least have some cover there, given we don't have much.
Again, I'll come to you in a wee second, Sheryl, because I don't know what your thoughts would be, but I would be genuinely nervous if we went into the season with Romans and Scally as the backup, just because of the amount of games that we play, 50, 60 games a year. It's great to have Scally there as a left back, but as we've seen with Kyle Glasgow and stuff like that, being able to push those boys out on loan to get experience in men's football is a much better way than having them sitting there in case one of those two first choice left backs get injured. I think the name that's obviously linked there for a while is Penrice, but that seems to have gone quiet. But definitely think a left back to give competition to Romans would be a good move at some point. Is it a massive priority compared to other areas just now? For me personally, not. But it's definitely an area that towards the end of the window, whether it's a permanent or whether it's a loan, we definitely need to bolster that.
Yeah, and I think there's I suppose we need to remember is there's still about 6 weeks of the window. I know because the season starts on Friday, for us it's a mad panic, but I suppose if you're being a wee bit more realistic about it, there is probably not a team in the league, and I know nobody else matters. What we fixate on is ourselves and what we think about as Rangers, but there will not be another team in the league that are ready to go either. Do you know what I mean? You look at the nick of Hearts and Hibs last week; they're nowhere near ready. I think that the main priority for us just now, for me, would be somebody on the right, because we're desperate there. We absolutely need somebody. If he wants to play with wingers and we want to give these guys up front decent service, you need to get somebody over on the right hand side. For me, Penrice would be a no-brainer, because he'd be coming in at a decent level. It'd be really good cover for Romans. You could probably, with the amount of games that we're going to play between the Cups and Europe, you could interchange them as well. For me, Penrice would be a no-brainer, but I think somebody over on the right-hand side first would be my priority, a right winger.
Yeah, and I think the signing that we hit the post with, as McInnes put it, I think after the St Etienne game, was probably the boy Diawara, who ended up going to AC Milan, because I think he was a left centre half that could have played at left back. So that would have been a great signing for us to be able to get through the door, because he gives you that versatility. There's been a few. So when we talk about right wingers, maybe difference makers, there's obviously been a couple that have been linked. You spoke about Cheryl. The other boy is what's his name? Dewberry. I can never remember the first part of that, but then you've also got the longest running saga, I think, in football history, which is the Dahl signing as well. Now, all three of those players could easily come in and add a little bit something different to the team that we've got at the moment. As you say, the right wing position seems to be the favourite. I'd love to see us get that in before the game, but let's not forget that there is a young boy at Spurs as well, that hasn't gone anywhere, and I know there's still a lot of interest in him. And people will always look at the stats and say that his numbers weren't good enough, but for me, it was just his ability to carry the ball that got us out of a hole sometimes. So if we could do anything to get Mikey Moore back, Mark, I think that would definitely be one of the players that I would love to see in those wide areas come back if we could. Whether he can play on the right or not, but yeah, a bit different for me.
I'd bite your hand off if it was Mikey Moore. And I didn't know, Sheryl, when he said a loan move or it could be permanent. I didn't know if that's who he was referencing. That's rumour. I'm not spreading rumours or anything, but that's kind of the first name that came in my head when Darren McInnes has said that today. But if we get Mikey Moore, I think he started, it was a bit of a struggle for him at the start, but I think, for me, from January onwards, he was absolutely sensational. He's a young lad, and I think he carried that team far too much for a young lad to do that. I think there's too many that were hiding when he was still trying to take the ball, get us up the pitch. And, as I say, maybe stats-wise, it wasn't the best, but I think, some of the players he was playing with as well, there's some questions around that. And there's been, I've seen on X as well, like, just with regards to Czerny, like the £6-7 million, why would we pay that for, like, Czerny's age and stuff? But I just think sometimes you've just got to buy that experience and get them in the building and they'll hit the ground running. You know what I mean? It's not a matter of making a return in terms of sell on, etc. It's just a matter of, what will they deliver when they're in the building? And for me, if he's scoring X amount of goals, we're progressing in Europe, that pays for the fee itself. I think sometimes we've been so much into this project players, blah, 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 where sometimes we just need that, like we've done with Sharon, Clint, etc. We've not paid for them, but, just bringing in that experience and with what Graham Souness here, but like senior pros definitely has that impact right from the get-go. And we've obviously seen, the success he had when he was here in terms of his goals and assists. I think if we can, I think there's probably some bits in terms of barriers with Besiktas, and I think they're trying to get Salah, if I remember rightly. So there's probably some barriers in that, but if we can push with it, then, I think we need to go after him if we can. But I would rather at least some form. But then we could look at Skov Olsen, I guess. We thought we had a brilliant winger in January, and sometimes these things just happen. So, but he's tried and tested. I think that's the difference. That's why I'd be willing to pay that amount of money given the success he had before.
It's a fair point. Again, I think we spoke about it briefly last Sunday as well. Kearney and a McInnes team doesn't necessarily equal Kearney in the previous system. You're not going to be guaranteed to get that return, I guess. On to the tasty bit now, Cheryl. We've got our first league game coming up against Dundee United. We're hopefully going to have another 2 new players in the door. You know, we've got another 4 days of training, and the players being drilled by McInnes. What can we realistically expect up at Tannadice on Friday night when that whistle gets blown?
Listen, I'll not be bothered because I'll be watching it in a bar in Spain, a few sangrias down. So listen, see, as long as we get a win. Like I said, we've had a lot to deal with. We know we've still got a lot of players that we need to get rid of. We know we've maybe got 2, possibly 3 still to come in. There's still 6 weeks of the window. See, as long as we get a win. As long as we can get a win, and I know obviously we would want a decent performance as well, but just to start off the season with a win, give us a wee bit of confidence. Something I meant to speak about when we were talking about the St Etienne game, the fact that Derek McInnes made reference to the players going off at half-time and feeling sorry for themselves actually gave me a lot of confidence in him as a manager as well, and his ability to kind of give them a wee bit of a shake, but to recognise these things in them as well. I like Danny Rule, but I don't think he was as forthright and upfront as Derek McInnes is going to be. And again, having Derek McInnes there to drive the standards, he knows what's expected. He seems to be an excellent man manager as well. So see if we can go to Tannadice. We know there's still a lot of work to be done. We've still got a lot of training. We've still got the team to get used to each other. We have to get a kind of formation that the players are comfortable in. But as long as we can go to Tannadice, get a win and set the season off on the right foot, then I will be more than happy with that. Listen, see if we win 2-0. 3-1, something like that, I'd be delighted by that. But even 1-0, I'd just be happy with that to start off with.
I think that's the thing, Mark. You know, we can talk about the squad being in a better position than it was last year, or whether it is or not. That's a moot point. All that really matters is that we can put out a good quality first 11 against Dundee United that can beat them. And at the end of the day, we've still got 5 weeks to go to bring in more players. The squad that we have should be good enough to go to Tannadice and get a win. And if it isn't, pack your bags. I'm not doing another pod for the next year because there's no hope. But we need to back ourselves a wee bit. And I think sometimes that we might not be in the perfect position. But if you look at what the potential starting lineup would be, you've got Pandur in goal, Romans at left back, Fernandez and Godfrey as your centre halves, with a choice of McCrory or Sterling at right back. It's a fairly solid defence from what we've seen so far. You know, midfield options really, really strong there. You know, if you're going to go with your 2 holders, would you put Devlin and Neil in there? Asgard as being the more attacking midfielder, Curtis Gassama on both wings, and then, you know, a Chermiti or a Shankland up top. That is a fairly strong starting lineup. And a team that does have quality in it. So we've got to fancy ourselves to go to United and win. And like Cheryl said, there's going to be no team in the country that is going to be happy with the position that their squad is in. It's a World Cup year, a lot of business still to be done, and more players to come in. But from a starting lineup point of view, there's more than enough in that squad to win that game on Friday.
No, absolutely. And I think that back 5 in terms of goal and back 4, I was quite impressed with it. I think, you know, we referenced it a little bit in terms of West Ham. We will be a difficult team to beat. I think under McInnes, you know, look at McInnes' history. He's got teams that are difficult to beat. And I think first and foremost, we will be. So defensively, I'm not overly worried. But I think you're right. When you look at a team on paper, that team should be beating Dundee United. And that's not an arrogant thing. It's just, I think it's a far better team. I think we need to get through these couple of weeks. So we've got Dundee United away, then we've got that Polish team away, and then Hibs at home. I think the couple of weeks just give us that time of bringing in a couple of additional bodies. I think it's going to be absolutely critical. If we can get these 2 in this week, you know, and they can both have an impact on Friday, then that puts us in a better place. Obviously, hopefully in the attacking third to bolster that. But I think, from my perspective, Friday will be a tough game. Dundee United's never an easy place to go. I think to Cheryl's point, win 1-0, stuffy. Do we care? No, just get the points on the board and gas on our way. And then we'll also see that European game. But I just think if we can just get 3 points, it buys us a little bit of time. I think the last thing we want is a draw, getting beat, and then the pressure's on. And there'll be questions about obviously our recruitment, etc. Whereas I think there is some decent business in there. But I think there's some moving parts to obviously support where we take the next steps. Just a matter of getting through Friday. I don't think it'll be easy, but there's still more than enough quality for us to see it through, given that team you referenced there, Rob's got plenty of ability and should be scoring goals. But I think from a defensive point of view, we've got a manager who has got a track record of doing well in that part.
There we go. A great way to end. We're all wishing for 38 1-0 victories, and that'll get a season done. Happy days. I don't think anyone else could take it, but at least we'll win the title if that happens. I need to say a massive, massive thank you to both my guests for joining me tonight. Mark, as always, a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Sorry, mate. No, it's been good being on. Thank you both for having me. And it's great to catch up as always and speak about Rangers. So.
As always, Cheryl, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for rushing back from the gantry just to make sure you could do the Sunday show with us.
That's all right. Lovely to be with you, gents. Thank you for having me.
I need to say another massive, massive thank you to our exclusive Sunday show sponsor, Mortgage First. Absolutely delighted that they have given the Sunday show their back in this season. Also need to say a massive thank you to all of the 4 Lads sponsors. CBD Oil Scotland, LBJ Consultants, Elite Scooters Scotland, Metaclad, the Aesthetics Lounge by Sharon, and Denhay Bacon, as well as our very own Candide, along with all the season-long partners we've got at Rangers Youth Development Company, Black Rooster and Art of Gold. If you want to become a member and get access to all the ad-free shows as well as the other content that we have put out there for you, please have a little look in the show notes or the QR code in one of the corners, wherever that is. As always, we'll be back with shows every single night next week. But Monday, it will be your usual with Stevie Kenny, and Davey might be joining as well. All that's left for me to do is thank you all for tuning in to watch us live or listening to us back via your normal pod sources. We do appreciate the support and hope that you can continue to share the pod online and amongst friends and family. Good night and have a great week, everybody. Cheers.
The 4 Lads Rangers podcast is proudly sponsored by Candide, LBJ Consultants, CBD Oil Scotland, Elite Scooters Scotland and Metaclad, 4 Lads exclusive roofing partner. The Aesthetics Lounge by Sharon, Denhay, the quintessential British bacon. Thank you to all our sponsors, and in partnership with Black Rooster, Art of Gold and Rangers Youth Development Company. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.